Hey y'all, welcome to Brianna Approved, a podcast for people who like a holistic approach to real science and clinical research on all things nutrition, botanicals, and balance. I'm your host, Brianna Diorio, clinical nutritionist, herbal practitioner, and recovering super spaz. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 3 of the Brianna Approved podcast. I am excited for today's episode because we are going to be digging into herbal energetics, herbal properties. We're going to be doing a Botanical Brie spotlight on nervines and Skullcap and Hops in particular at the end, and hopefully give you a little bit more understanding about how to get an herbal protocol that is right for you. But before we hop into the show, let's do our fun fact of the day while I sip cafe. Did you know about 1/3 of the population uses medicinal herbs as some form of alternative therapy? Now, this should not come as a surprise because we have seen the rise in immune education over the past year with all things COVID. We have been seeing people trying to, get herbal supplements and immune supplements at everywhere from, your local health food store to I've seen them at Wawa and different coffee stands. So the herbal industry is booming. It's about a $6.3 billion industry, but it's really important for people to understand that not all herbal supplements are created equal. Just like anything, when we're dealing with our health, you get what you pay for many times, and we have to be aware of what's going on behind the scenes. For those of you who don't know, I have actually been studying under a master herbalist for the past 2.5 years. I am the global educator for an herbal company, so I have learned a lot about what goes on from everything in the procurement of raw materials, so how we're actually getting these, working with a botanist, working with an organoleptics team, so somebody who looks at how an herb physically looks, but also the taste of it, as well as, extraction processes. So this is really, really in-depth stuff that a lot of people don't think about when they're just buying an herbal formula. What I always tell people is just because you like to cook doesn't mean that you are a chef. I've been studying herbalism and botanicals and, wellness for many, many years, but it wasn't until I started actually working under an herbalist that I learned a lot about some of these other things that I was just talking about. It's really important to understand that the quality of the raw material, so what botanicals you're actually working with, is step one, but also understanding the herbal energetics is very important for formulations, not only for formulating something on a mass market scale, but even if you're trying to play around in your kitchen and have some formulas for yourself. So this is what we're going to kind of dive into today, talking a little bit more about what makes, these herbs unique, kind of the herbal version of biochemical individuality, if you will, or in Chinese medicine, you might hear the term differential diagnosis, understanding your constitutional type, or herbal matchmaking. Kind of just like in the dating world, everybody isn't going to be a fit for everybody. So same thing goes for herbs. Everything isn't going to be a fit for everyone. Just like we have our own different characteristics and personality traits and quirks and all these things that make us unique little butterflies, this is what's going on with botanicals as well. Different herbs and different botanicals have their own characteristics, which give them very specific properties. And so each herb can have a different effect on the body according to these herbal energetics or these characteristics that work together to give an herb a unique personality and a unique use in the body. This is important for basically understanding the language of herbalism, for creating specific protocols, for making formulations, and for figuring out what is my jumping off point for what I need more of right now versus what I might need more of long term, depending on my biochemical individual needs, depending on some of my genetic predispositions or genetic chinks in the chain, if you will, and just building a general herbal first aid kit. So when we're thinking about herbal matchmaking and herbal energetics, we want to think about a couple of different categories and how to break this down. I think two of the main categories that people can start with when we're thinking on a macro level is going to be warming versus cooling herbs. And if we take a step back and make this even more simple, think about how your body naturally does this. It's the winter right now. I love to ski. I love to shred the gnar, whatever you want to call it. Now, if anybody has gone and played outside in the winter, when you come inside after a day of being out in the freezing cold, you're probably going to say to yourself, I could go for something really warm right now. I want some hot cocoa. I want tea. I want a hot toddy. There's a very low probability that you're going to say, I could really go for a cold smoothie. Just like in the summer, after you've been frolicking at the beach and getting your daily D on and playing outside, you don't come inside and say, I could go for a bowl of soup. You might then say, I could really go for some like iced tea or a fresh smoothie. So this is what's happening with herbs and botanicals, and when we again are meeting ourselves where we are. When we talk about warming herbs, we want to think about things that heat the body, that they can be stimulating. They're very yang in nature. So these can be things like carminatives, right? So think about if you have an upset stomach, you want to drink some nice hot tea. They can be diuretic in nature. They can also be blood and chi tonics. So again, think about things like cayenne and ginger, fennel, anise, and even orange peel. Again, because this is going to help warm things up. You've been outside, you're cold. Now, when we talk about cooling herbs, these are things that are going to help clear heat from the body. They can have detoxifying properties. They can be anti-inflammatory in nature, and they can be a little bit more yin. So these are things like mint and peppermint, marshmallow, dandelion. Again, you come in from a really hot day of playing outside. We want to cool things down. Now from here, we're going to get a little bit deeper into herbal properties and how we can go a step further with things that can be drying, things that can be warming, things that can be cooling, things that can be heating. So you can kind of classify herbs again, depending on their specific actions in the body, as well as the body systems that it may have an affinity for. So it's really important to, again, start with our energy, our herbal energetics. Do we want something that is more hot and warm? Do we want something that is more neutral? Or do we need something that is more cool and cold in nature? When we're thinking about things as far as herbal properties being in one category, we need to understand that many times they can have dual properties, just like we can have many personalities and different quirks and things like that. All of this is very dynamic. So there are certain botanicals that can be heating and drying in nature. This is important to remember because this is where your constitutional type comes in. If you are somebody who is already very dry in nature and you add a lot of drying botanicals to your formulation or your tea, that might make things really, really dry in your body internally, and you might need to add in things that are going to be more demulcent in nature or add more mucus and add more moisture. If you think about coming inside from a day of skiing and your socks are wet and you put them over your radiator, the radiator is really hot, right? So it's heating, but it's also going to dry things out. So this is why certain herbs can be both heating and drying at the same time, or even drying and warming. When we're talking about heating and drying things, this is going to be, again, cinnamon, cayenne, ginger, turmeric. Think about things that are spicy and fiery. When we're thinking about things that are more drying in nature, we want to think about, again, things like rose and hibiscus, mint, lemon balm, dandelion, and then things that kind of fall in between that can be warming and circulating. So things like black pepper and cardamom. This is all really important for herbal energetics. Then we move on to flavor. Flavor is also important because depending on what the flavor of a botanical is, this is the field of organoleptics. When we talk about actually testing for botanicals and the quality, we want them to taste a certain way. If you've ever had something like fresh echinacea, there's something in there called alkaloids, which actually give you this almost like numbing feeling in your mouth. Same thing with kava. It's very bitter in nature, right? Because this actually can send a signal to the hypothalamus or a part of the brain that says, oh, we need to kind of calm things down. So some of the different flavors can also have different affinities for various organs in the body. The spleen, for example, loves things that are sweet. So something like astragalus or even marshmallow root can be really nice and nutritive to the spleen. Something that is salty in nature, like, your kelps and your algae and your iodines, these can have an affinity for things like your kidneys and your adrenals. So sour, bitter, sweet, pungent, and salty is also important to think about. Okay, I understand the herbal energetics, hot, warm, neutral, cool, cold. Now, what is the flavor? Do I need something that is bitter in nature because I have digestive issues maybe? Do I need something that is sweet? Do I need something that is salty? And then lastly, we also have direction and organ meridians that are affected. So again, certain botanicals can move upward in nature, some can move downward, right? And then some can move inward and outward. And then lastly, what am I actually taking this for? Do I have issues with my liver right now? Does my heart need extra help? Is my lung and my spleen deficient? Are my kidneys excess? Are they deficient? So that's kind of all step one before we even think about making a formulation and what do I need right now versus what do I need long term. So that's a lot to take in. But again, when we're thinking about classifications of herbs, again, we want to say, what specific action on the body am I looking to get out of this botanical? Do I want something that is a diaphoretic in nature? Do I need something that is sedative? Do I want something that's a nervine? Then we have to think about our biochemical individuality. This is where herbal matchmaking comes in, meeting yourself where you are. What do I need more of right now versus what do I need more of long term? And then thinking about the specific properties of these botanicals, the energy, the taste, the direction, and the organ or meridian affected. I want to spend the next few minutes talking about particular herbal properties for different needs that you might have. So I want to start with demulcents and mucilaginous herbs because we are in the winter months right now and things can be really dry. You might notice that you do this a lot, or you have a dry cough, which can give you a raspy voice, which can be kind of sexy, but maybe we don't always want that. So we need botanicals that are mucilaginous in nature. Think of the term mucus, right? Mucilaginous, mucus-like. Think about if you left a bowl of oatmeal on your counter and it gets really, really thick. That's what happens with these mucilaginous herbs. They're demulcent in nature, meaning that they can help to soothe and protect some of these irritated or inflamed tissues. So again, if you have a raw, scratchy throat, if you've had a really dry cough for a while, your tissues can become overinflamed and overexcited. We want to calm things down. What I love about a lot of these mucilaginous and demulcent herbs in the winter months is that it's so easy to make your own teas at home. You can use something like mountain rose herbs and order these bulk botanicals and take something like marshmallow root or licorice root and even slippery elm and make a cold decoction. So basically what you do is you just take the botanical and you pour water over it and you let it macerate or kind of hang out for, 4 to 12 hours. And then you can drink that over the next couple of days. So some of my favorite demulcent botanicals, like I said, are going to be marshmallow root, not to be confused with marshmallows, slippery elm, licorice, mullein, and aloe. Next, I want to talk about expectorant herbs. This is also very important this time of the year because we are mucousy maybe. We can have productive and unproductive coughs. This is very important as well to identify what kind of cough do I have right now? Do I have a cough that is full of mucus and very wet? If that's the case, there's a good chance I need to thin this mucus out and get it out of my body. If it's a very dry, unproductive cough, like you're hacking up a lung, that's where you might need to actually add moisture to the body. So that's where some of these demulcent and mucilaginous herbs come in. Now, if we look at the word expectorant, expel is kind of in there, right? So they help to expel mucus from the body. It helps to break up mucus in the lungs and make you have a more productive cough. Mucus inherently is really important for the body. It's very healthy. It helps to trap bacteria and viruses. But if it stays in the body too long, it's kind of like a pond that hasn't moved in a really long time. It gets murky and can slow things down. So some of these expectorants that can be a little drying in nature, some of them can actually be mildly irritating, are going to be things like yerba santa, licorice root, horehound, and elecampane. These are things that you might see if you're looking at a botanical formula. Then we want to think about diaphoretic herbs. This is important for somebody who maybe has poor circulation. Maybe you don't sweat a lot. Maybe you need to have more of a productive fever again. So kind of pushing through that fever protocol because fevers are really important from a healing innate immune response, but we want to make sure that it's productive. So these diaphoretics basically help raise your body temperature. They can make you sweat. They can stimulate circulation. They can cool the body through increasing perspiration as well. So these are going to be things like yarrow, which is really nice to have, boneset, cayenne, ginger, and even elderflower. Then we have carminative herbs. I love carminative herbs because my digestive system is very sensitive to stress. If you ever think about like getting butterflies in your tummy, or if you get a stressed stomach, right, ulcers and things like that, carminatives can be really nice for helping to keep your digestive system happy. They can help if you have a lot of excess gas going on, if you have a lot of bloating, maybe you feel like you have a food baby because you ate too much. Maybe you're in a new relationship and you're going out to restaurants a lot and you're eating foods that you normally wouldn't. Carminatives are really nice for helping support digestion. If you've ever left an Indian restaurant, you might notice that they have usually a handful of these before you leave. Things like anise and fennel, and then even things like chamomile, peppermint, and ginger. Many of our bitter botanicals, so things like orange peel and artichoke and dandelion, these also help as having carminative properties. They can stimulate appetite and digestion. This is why you might notice in places like Europe having a digestivo before you have your dinner, or an aperitivo, can be really nice because it can help stimulate digestion, kind of calm that nervous tummy. So if you don't want to break out bitters or, a digestive tea, you can maybe order a Negroni on your date. Or you can even save something like orange peel and pour hot water over that and let that simmer or steep for about 20 minutes, and you can have a nice tea that can be carminative. So that's really, really nice to keep on hand. And then lastly, before we get into our Botanical Brie segment, we're going to just touch base on nervines because we're going to talk about nervines in the body and how they can be beneficial. So nervines are herbs that support the nervous system. Many times they can be calming, but sometimes we also have some stimulating nervines as well. So again, if you think about the saying, someone's getting on my nerves, when you say that, what happens is like your blood starts to boil. You get riled up. You start to feel anxious. This is things that are affecting the nervous system. I used to joke in grad school all the time and say, I'm quite literally going to have a nervous breakdown. Again, because your nervous system deals with your central nervous system, so our brain and our spinal cord, but also our peripheral nervous system, so our fight or flight response, as well as our rest and digest or feed and breed. So herbs that fall into this category of nervines kind of exist on a continuum. Again, we have some that are calming, but won't necessarily affect alertness. So you could take this during the day. Somebody who's particularly stressed out, maybe very tense when we think about things like tension headaches, right? Or people who hold a lot of their stress up in their shoulders. Maybe you get that low-grade chronic anxiety that's happening. Things like, skullcap and kava can be great where they're not, too sedative in nature. And then on the other end of our nervine category, we do have things that are much more sedative in nature. So these are really good for people who maybe have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. They have really busy minds. They maybe have pain physically in their body, which is affecting their ability to calm down. So, things like milky oats and hops and even valerian can be a bit more sedative in nature, where we want to take those. So nervines, again, are really great for helping to support the nervous system. Things that can kind of calm down that stress response and kind of get you more into that rest, digest, feed, or breed mode and kind of take you off of that adrenaline high that you've been on all day long. And now for the last segment of the show, we are going to do Botanical Brie, which basically highlights some of my favorite botanicals and how you can easily incorporate them into your daily routine. So we're going to be talking about two of my favorite nervines, hops and skullcap. Let's start with skullcap because I really love botanicals that look like what they do. For example, if you look at something like hawthornberry, it's red in nature, it kind of looks like a heart, it has an affinity for the cardiovascular system. Skullcap is really cool because it looks like there's almost a little skull, a little cap over the top of the plant. And so this is really good for people who are super heady, right? They're like in their own head. They're anxious, they're stressed, maybe they are irritable. There is a very, very cool compound in skullcap called baicalin. So baicalin has been researched for its ability to help with things like anxiety by actually activating GABA A receptors and glycine receptors in the brain, which can help calm things down. Some people take glycine by itself as a supplement for improving sleep and enhancing memory, but this baicalin compound has been very researched as well for increasing the production of antioxidants, particularly by activating NRF2, which we talked about in last week's episode, but basically helping with liver detoxification. So when we're thinking about skullcap, we want to think about the person who has a hard time relaxing. They can't shut their brain off and they have a lot of stress and tension, and maybe they're actually holding that in their body physically. They have nervous tension, they get stress headaches. Skullcap is nice because it can actually help to decrease the frequency in which nerves send pain signals to the brain. Skullcap also contains glutamine and GABA, amino acids that can kind of help with relaxation. So energetically speaking, skullcap is actually bitter and cooling in nature. So it's indicated for people who tend to have more of a warm constitution or maybe run a little hot. So very good for people who get overstimulated and overexcitable. Maybe they get stressed out and angry, and even things like, panic attacks. So I love Skullcap in acute situations where you feel like, you're kind of getting riled up, as well as some of these intense situations that can secondarily lead to more of a stress, anxiety response. It's calming and soothing to the nervous system, and it's really nice for, chronic and acute kind of situations as a sedative, as an anxiolytic, and a nerve tonic sedative. So I love Skullcap. Lastly, we are going to talk about hops, which, believe it or not, is a cousin of the cannabis sativa family, also known as marijuana. There is about 75 known varieties of hops. I'm not a beer drinker, unfortunately, but this is some of the same beneficial compounds that you can have from drinking something like an IPA. So because I don't love drinking beer, I can get the same benefits from utilizing hops. And what I love about hops is that it's very good for people who are like hopped up on life, I would call it. Those very intense personalities, you have a lot of strong emotions, and this for you can result in nervous exhaustion, insomnia, and even worry. So besides its role in making beer, hops are known for their sedative properties. The story goes that farmers that were working in hop fields would feel very sleepy after an entire day of working with the hops plant because of the plant's catkins, which is basically like this flower cluster. And that's what led hops to its reputation as being a sedative. So there is a compound in hops called lupulin, which is basically this golden resin that's found in hops. And this is what's responsible for this sedative, kind of relaxing property. Now, energetically, hops is cooling and drying in nature. Again, so very good for that constitutional type who maybe runs hot, who's hopped up on life, again, and maybe has some of that nervous tension, that nervous exhaustion. Maybe they get a nervous stomach or digestive distress because of that. And maybe they can have, pain and spasms in the body, intestinal cramping. So I really love hops. It's a really strong bitter, so it can be a relaxing nervine as well, and just really good for that insomnia, worry, kind of type A personality. So I hope you guys enjoyed this dive into herbal energetics and getting a little bit more knowledge about herbs and formulations and understanding your kind of herbal matchmaking for what you might need, understanding the biochemical individuality, the herbal language of these different plants. And I hope you enjoyed and learned something new, and I'll see y'all for next week's episode. Ciao. Ba-da-da-da-da-da.